Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Within the Sands, written by In Yellow Clad. Welcome, one and all, to the 582nd Interstellar Innovation Conference, sponsored by our host, the Zactu Ascendancy. Once again, we welcome the regulars to our humble gathering, and also welcome any newcomers as well. Maps can be found in the information kiosks. The booming voice that blared from the PA was quickly tuned out by the mouse-like alien known as Kibu. This was her first experience of such an event, and she found her poor, sensitive senses a bit overwhelmed by all the noise and the people. But she would endure, after all. How was she supposed to get a job if she couldn't handle a crowd or being potentially overstimulated to this degree? One thing she could easily admit to not liking was the planet this event was hosted on. The Zactu, being a reptilian species, meant that they preferred warm planets, and this one, Lidorlora, was exceptionally warm. So much so that there wasn't anything actually living native to it. She was courting death just by hesitating outside the convention center. With a deep breath, she stepped inside and breathed a very deep sigh of relief as the climate control systems cooled her down considerably. But she couldn't loiter. To do so, with her stature, would surely result in being trampled to death by the press of people enjoying themselves around her. She came up to the hip of an average human male, and considered there weren't many species as small as hers was. She was used to having to look up at everyone and scampering around their legs. Unfortunately, today she could not scamper. She had to walk on two legs just like everyone else, save a few exceptions. Her bag would not permit scampering, nor would its contents. So with another deep breath, she drove into the fray and began her journey. She visited every store she could, ogling at the little display models of the company's latest piece of technology that they would later be showing off to everyone. She tried her best, selling herself well to potential employers, or at least she thought she did, but none of them were willing to hire her. Hours passed, and as the day wore on, she began to grow more and more depressed, till she stopped at what was the last stall and found it somewhat lackluster. It was a human company, not a big-name one just yet. Some might say that it was just a start-up at this point in time, but she still didn't know that. Like all the other times, she stepped up to the table and shifted a convenient stool so that she could climb up onto it. "Hello," she squeaked, and the lone human behind the table jerked upright. He was a scruffy, scrawny, wild-looking fellow who looked like he was suffering from a mixture of chronic insomnia, caffeine addiction, and general disregard for his appearance. He stared at her in confusion for a moment, before rubbing his eyes and fixing his glasses. Hi," he said, and she narrowed her eyes in a way that she knew humans found cute and endearing. "Greetings," her gaze flickered to the name tag on his shirt, which told her his name was Thomas. "Thomas, my name is Kibu, and I would like to apply for a job with your company. I can provide many character references and examples of my work, though I am afraid my resume is a bit small. This would be my first major employment," she said, reaching into her bag and producing a small datapad upon which her resume was kept. She plopped it down before the human and stared at him, the man looking perplexed by her appearance. But regardless of this, he did still pick up the datapad and look over her resume. He didn't seem all that surprised by her list of former employers. They were your bog-standard retail jobs, the sort someone would take while still in school. And considering her apparent age as was listed in the document, she'd only just graduated. Nodding slowly and running his long, thin fingers through the hair, he set the pad down and laced his fingers together while looking her in her very large eyes. For all his scruffiness, he suddenly looked quite serious. "I thank you for your honesty, and I'd be delighted to see these examples you mentioned, Miss Kibu." He put on a polite smile and watched with curious glint in his eye as she produced small models of her designs. They were all well-made, machines of all shapes and sizes. Each one she placed down, she explained in great detail, all while Thomas listened closely, now and then picking up a model carefully to get a closer look at it. This was the farthest she'd gotten today. Most potential employers had taken one look at her resume and education and then refused to hear or see anything further. But humanity had proven itself to be open-minded sort, so long as you found the right human. Plenty were incredibly wary of anyone not human. Some were downright openly xenophobic to an extreme that was alarming. "This is all amazing work you've done," Thomas began, and though it brightened her day to hear some of that, his tone of voice suggested that he would also refuse her a position within the company. "Unfortunately, However, I don't have the authority to hire anyone. I'm just here to hand out pamphlets and stuff. But my boss is also here and preparing for the presentation that's happening later. So I'll just write you this and this. You can fill these out and give them to him later. I'll even put in a good word or four just for you." He handed her the pad and then slid over another set of pads. These ones were less advanced than her own. They looked like an application and some basic information on the company as well. She couldn't believe what she was hearing, her ears trembling in excitement and just a little disbelief. Hastily, she slipped her pad back into her bag, along with the models, and scooped up the tablets Thomas had provided. Her eyes sparkled as she looked up at him. "Thank you. Thank you very much. Hey, attention, gentle beings. The live demonstrations are about to begin. Please make your way to the theater and enjoy the show." The booming voice interrupted her, and she blinked in surprise. Thomas hardly seemed bothered by the volume of the voice as he stood and stuffed anything that was valuable into a special and quite hidden box. "Oh, you're totally going to want to see this. Come on, I'll get you a front row seat," he offered, and the generosity was almost too much for her to handle. So wordlessly, she followed him, wondering just what his company would show off. Together, they meandered towards the theatre with everyone else. As the press of the crowd became a bit too much for her to handle, she found herself getting scooped up and placed on his back. While this was a touch embarrassing, she did not complain as she clung to his clothes in a very successful attempt to not get separated from him. Entering the theatre, he carried her over to a small table at the front, where the new companies were always placed. Legacy companies were in the middle sections, while the general public was placed in the back. Setting her down carefully, he mumbled an apology for manhandling her without permission, but she waved it off and thanked him for at least helping her, even though she had not asked for it. Then they settled in for the show. The older companies went first, showing off their fancy new hovercar, personal star yachts, or other machines. These always earned the loudest applause, but most simply glossed over these creations. A problem with the big companies were that they were unwilling to take risks and make something new, something original. Everything they made these days was a variation of something another company had made a decade ago. The spark of inspiration had long since dwindled, replaced with worry about irrelevancy and the desire to squeeze as much money out of the public with the latest shiny new thing. The new companies got the most rapt attention. They had to take risks, after all, to really reach the public's eye. Most came up with new and exciting things that actually made life markedly better, or worse, depending on the aim of the company. For example, one showed off a new capital ship railgun that managed to outperform every other railgun on the market. It had a few flaws that they were working on, but even Kiva could tell that they were easy fixes. They just had to be careful to ensure these fixes didn't make any new problems. And then it was time for the company Thomas belonged to present, and so his boss stepped up to the stage. He was a handsome man by human standards, at least, and well-dressed down to everything but his shoes. Those were what the humans called sneakers, if she recalled correctly. "Hello, everyone. I am Dominic Warren, and I am the CEO of Eclipse Enterprises. We are just getting started back in the home system, but we have plans to expand into just about every field of commerce and industry that we can. But you're not interested in that, are you? No, you're interested in what we've brought to show off." He spoke confidently and with a wide, welcoming, happy grin on his face. There was something in his eyes that suggested that he was maybe unreasonably excited about what was to come. "Allow me to introduce the Deuce Vermis." He fiddled with a remote and the screen lit up overhead, showing off something. The schematics were so convoluted that none of them, save for two humans who worked on it, could understand what they were looking at. "Now, I know that it may not look like much, but let me tell you, this thing lives up to its name. It's modular and meant for all manner of uses, from terraforming to mining and even combat. This thing will fit any role save that of being a parent," he chuckled, and everyone chuckled softly as well, unsure of what he was even talking about. "Now, how about a practical demonstration?" Again he fiddled with the remote, and the screen darkened, while the wall behind him turned transparent, tended to shade the viewers from the harsh sunlight. And outside, there was nothing but sand. "No, well, they take their sweet time showing up. Let me give you some numbers to chew on. Each unit is approximately 1 kilometer long, 60 meters in diameter, and can reach up top speeds of up to 320 miles per hour in a straight line with no serious obstructions. For those of you unfamiliar with human measurements, please refer to the conversion charts." Kiva and everyone else in the room did just that, a collective gasp rising from the crowd of onlookers. Dominic's grin only grew larger, and they all looked up in disbelief. "Where is this machine of yours?" the representative of one of the older and more prestigious companies spoke, and there was a murmur of questions along the same lines that followed. "Should be showing up any time now," Dominic stated, looking over his shoulder at the outside world where there was just nothing. Nothing but heat and sand. After 5 minutes, which turned into 10, there was still no sign of the machines that he had been talking about, and people were starting to get agitated. "Where is it? We want to see it." "Clearly, you are misleading us all." Even Kibu was starting to wonder if the man had been playing them all for fools. But then a gasp rose from the eastern portion of the theatre, and someone stood, pointing out the window. "There, I see something," they spoke, and everyone looked where they indicated. Sure enough, they could see something moving through the shimmering waves of heat rising off the sands. That's when it began, a gentle humming that seemed to resonate through the foundations of the building. "I don't recall this planet suffering from tectonic instability," Kibu muttered to Thomas, who just grinned and shook his head. "That's because it doesn't. Keep watching. It's about to get good," he said, and she focused on the movement outside. The building began to shake more and more violently, a malevolent vibration seeping into everything as whatever the Deus Vermis was drew closer. Outside, the movement began to take a more recognizable shape, a giant wave of sand displaced by something beneath it. This machine the humans had turned towards the building, and the size of a wave became worryingly apparent. Gasps of surprise, and then cries of alarm rose from the audience just before the wave subsided. Kiba glanced at Thomas in confusion and saw that he was tapping his leg and mouthing numbers, counting down towards something. Looking back outside, she watched in shock as the sand began to vibrate about 60 meters away from the building, before it was sucked downwards and a giant creature of metal rose from the dunes. It was a worm, a giant metal worm with shifting metal plates that constituted an armored hide, whirring saws and other cruel-looking implements that filled the gaping maw. It rose high into the air and then curled up like some sort of snake to regard the occupants of the theatre. Not a word was spoken, though the heart rates of everyone in attendance spiked sharply when another 4 of these machines rose around the first, but did not reach the same height. These ones were different. One looked like it was covered in all manner of ports meant to facilitate something that was not readily apparent. Another was covered in gigantic weapons, which were currently and clearly inoperative. One seemed entirely suited towards mining, and the last was sealed up tight, with fins protruding from it. Perhaps something meant for a more aquatic environment. "Behold our pride and joy, the Deus Vermis and its current incarnations. The first, as you can see, is the display model. No fancy bells and whistles, just pure worm. Up next, we have a terraformer variant, capable of sowing forests, creating mountains, splitting the oceans, and doing whatever needs doing to make the world habitable for all of us. Then there is, of course, the more industrial-focused one, meant mostly for mining, but I'm sure that you fine folk can find some creative uses for it besides that. Next is the combat variant. Pretty self-explanatory, I think. Lastly, we have the aquatic explorer version, fully sealed and capable of reaching incredible depths with only slight decreases in ability to function and remain safe for the crew." Dominic explained more, but Kibu drowned him out as Thomas leaned over. "I based him on a famous beastie from our fiction. What do you think?" he whispered, and she could only shake her head. I don't know what to say. They're beautiful," she whispered back, which seemed to make Thomas happy. He whispered something that made no sense to her at the moment, though. "May his passage cleanse the world," he murmured, then chuckled. The rest of the presentation was a blur, and it was capped off with an experience of seeing the worms dive back into the sands, heading off to who knew where. The room was abuzz with excitement, and Dominic received a standing ovation for his company's creation. Then Kibu found herself staring up at the man as everyone filed out. "Thomas, I see that you've made a friend. Care to introduce me?" he said, sounding more tired than he looked. Clearly, the presentation had taken a lot out of him. "Dom, this is Kibu. Kibu, Dom. She's looking to join our merry band of nerds and geeks," Thomas said, earning a short laugh from Dominic. "Is that so? I take it that you can vouch for her, then?" he asked. "Yep, she's got a brilliant mind, and the things she's got cooking in that noggin are top-notch stuff, at least on paper. I think she's worth it." During this exchange, Kibu had not managed to get a word in at all, but that didn't matter. She was far too nervous to say anything coherent or intelligent. Dominic focused his attention on her and held out his hand, bending down just slightly so that she could easily reach. "Well then, that's good enough for me. Welcome to the crew. We hope you like working with us," he said, and she placed her hand in his, entirely running off autopilot now. She couldn't believe this was really happening. But it was, and she was perhaps the luckiest person in the building. And out there, within the sands, the god worms did frolic. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.